A lot of money.
Okay, well, should we start?
Yeah.
Avatar Meher Baba
Ki
Jai. So the title I came up with is the Proem to Stay with God in its relation to Homeric Epos. And the word proem means in an epic, the opening part, the opening stanza. That typically, in the case of Western epic, includes an invocation to the muse or some other appeal for inspiration of that sort, and various other elements. And it seems to me that Francis has consciously started Stay with God that way. So I was going to look at both the opening lines and then a few other places in Stay with God where he uses Homer and the heroic. In fact, he was, as Jeff was saying, that he is really the one who has brought the heroic into our Baba culture. I don't know of any, that strain in heroic literature and so forth. I can't think of anyone else who has done that.
Yeah, and certainly Baba never talked much about sort of active heroic types like Joshua,
Right.
or David. But the Bible has these active heroic types, but not stressed in the Baba culture much at all.
And the Mahabharata is full of it.
What about through the Zoroastrian, the Shah Mahan?
Yeah, there's a lot of it there now that you mention it. Rustum and Zorab, there's a lot of the heroic martial fighting with heroic guys. At least my memory, I only read a bit of it a bunch of
I
years.
remember Francis describing Alabar's theatrics
As Shahnama.
when he was describing the Baba in English, what the various characters were doing.
Huh.
Saying that he is a very warrior man, Baba.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, I used to bicycle out to Merazad. One time Alaba greeted me and he looked in and said, he was a hero, Honda, I forget. Anyways, hero, whatever the make was, and he says, "That is because you are hero man." So I have it from Alaba, that I'm a hero man.
At least we got one in the Baba community.
So let's take a look at these opening stanzas. I would say clearly the first stanza and perhaps the first three. The whole opening section declares the theme. Okay, do you feel like reading it out, Jeff?
Sure. Wings towards the glaciers of Kailash, where the first fathers nourished the seed of God, and Shiva gentled Ganga, and Parvati walked by streams of living heart, for Shiva was Jesus before him, and Parvati his loveliness in the earth, as was Rama, as was Krishna, as was Abraham and Zarathustra, and Buddha and Muhammad, and their loveliness. God's avatar, as is now Baba. Sing, Baba, your descent this time on earth, your brightness in our night, your comfort in our separation.
Can you read the next two stanzas also? That's really the key part of the poem, but he develops it over the next two stanzas.
For it is my love's desiring, Baba, to compose a book on this theme, which you have set me, and to this task my spirit spreads its wings, only to fall stifled and overcome, the song groaning within my breast, impossible of utterance. For only a perfect master can speak a book, and saintship is the least qualification to sing of you, although a profound scholarship is sufficient for the assembling of mere facts. But I have neither devotion nor learning for the task. In the past you had Vyasa and Homer and Valmiki and many others who were your name and yourself to leave your name in impassioned prisonment of words, and saints innumerable who picked up the threads of your name's loveliness and wove them into bright patterned verse. Only if you, Baba, sustain my flight, give knowledge to my intellect, and unbind the empathy of my heart, can this work be done. Not miracle, but faith. Faith that is grace, and grace your miracle.
Thanks. Yeah. So a major element that you see here is what in classical literature is called the invocation to the muse. In this case, Francis's muse is Baba himself. We even have this word, sing Baba. So Baba himself is supposed to be the one to do the singing. So I wanted to go straight to Homer, where he... in fact, I'm going to read these out in the Greek just to give it a feel. I did study it in the Greek, actually. My fields were Old English and Greek. So this is the proem to the Iliad. In fact, Menin Aede. Aede means sing. So he says, sing Baba. It seems to me that Francis clearly has Homer in mind. This is in my opinion, the greatest poetry of the Western world is Homer, the greatest I've ever read. And he writes in what's called a dactylic hexameter. It's 6 beats. Da, and it can be either 2 syllables or 3 syllables per foot. Da 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 da. It could be da 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 da, or it could be da 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 da, or any combination of 2 or 3, and it's very mesmerizing. This was the great meter of classical times. Virgil also composed in it. It's one of the great meters of the world. So I'll read out the proem to this. Menin aede thea pelea dio achilleos ulo menin I moria kaios alge theke polos difthi mus psukas aidi proiapsen ero on autus de gloria tuche kunesen oio noisi te passi dios de te leo tobule exu de ta prota diasse tin irisantes Atriades, it's a beautiful hard read. Atriades te anaxandron kai dios achillios. So that's Menin is wrath or anger. Sing goddess, and the goddess here is the muse, and the muse is the daughter of Mnemosyne. I'm forgetting the word, Mnemosyne, who is memory. It's the daughter of memory. And there are 9 of them conventionally, and I forget which one it is, the muse of epic poetry, who is the source of inspiration. So sing goddess, the wrath of Peleus' son Achilles. Right here we have the main central theme of the Iliad, right there. Francis is doing the same thing, in fact. So the anger of Peleus' son Achilles and its devastation, which put pains 1,000-fold upon the Achaeans. hurled in their multitude to the house of Hades, strong souls of heroes, but gave their bodies to the delicate feasting of dogs, of all birds. And the will of Zeus was accomplished. This is explained right early in the Iliad, that actually Zeus's will is being fulfilled through this. Since that time, where first there stood in division of conflict, Atreus' son, that would be Agamemnon, I know it's sort of swallowed up here, of men, and brilliant Achilles. So the very opening part of the Iliad is Agamemnon is actually the supreme commander of the Achaeans, who are outside Troy, besieging Troy, and have been there for 10 years, yeah.
If I can just add a footnote here.
Yeah.
Most of you would know Eric Solovacki.
Yes.
Well, he has been studying Homer for many years, and he's worked out his own scheme of how Homer should be pronounced, and it's available as a download on the web. And he said he tried it out on simple Greek fishermen. He's got them to listen to him, and he said he succeeded in reducing them to helpless laughter.
That's success of some sort.
Yes.
No, he's really quite an expert on Homer. He reads Homer all the time. He must have had a lifetime in it. So these 7 lines are some of the most famous lines in Western literature. This is the Proem to the Iliad. So you can see the muse, several times in the course of the poem, he'll return to the muse. And the idea is that the muse has to sing through him, since he is in... I was looking for it just before this session. I couldn't find it. Somewhere he comes back and says, sing, O muse, because of ourselves we hear only rumors and know nothing. And somewhere Francis explicitly echoes that line.
Yeah, definitely. Mm.
I've forgotten just where it is
Yeah.
in Francis's thing.
Yeah.
And it's buried in the middle of the Iliad or the Odyssey somewhere. I've forgotten where it is. Yeah.
Are we reminiscent of the beginning of Bhagavad Gita? This line? I haven't read it for many years. Describe the battle, the two.
I don't think so. But the Bhagavad Gita is not the beginning of the poem. It's right in the middle of the Mahabharata.
I know, this opens almost like
Does it? We'd have to look at it and see. Actually, yeah, there is an appeal to, who is it? Someone who's watching the battle and is describing it to Duryodhana's dad. I forget how it was. That'd be interesting to see. Actually, when I was a scholar, my very field of specialization was heroic literature, Beowulf and Homer. And the Mahabharata, where the Gita is, features all kinds of heroic verse everywhere. I mean, they're huge battle scenes, and you see all these heroic attitudes and values coming into play very much. It was all over the world. Actually, the book I wrote was on verbal dueling on the battlefield, where the heroes would exchange insults and boasts.
Stigomythia.
Yeah, and there are certain cross-cultural themes that I certainly found in this heroic literature. So now this is the Iliad. Now here's the Odyssey. Really, it's such beautiful poetry. Andra moyenepe, musa, polutropon, hos malapola, planthe epe troies, hieron toliathron perse. Polon danthropon iden aspia, kainun igno, pola dogen ponto pathen algia, hon katathumon, arnumonosen pse anke psukein, kai noston atairon. Aludos etarus erusata hiemanosper, auton gar sveteresen tastaliesen olonto nepioi hoi katabus hupario no se elioio estion autoro toisen affelleto nostamanema ton namothenge theatu gatergios epe kai eme. Hey Paul. Came in for Homer. So tell me.
Where's that line? The cows of,
Yes.
that was the
Elias.
previous one? The cattle of the sun. Can you
Yeah.
explain anything about that?
Yeah, we'll get to that in a
Oh,
minute.
okay.
Mhm. Tell me, O Muse. Actually, it's interesting. Enepe, en means in, and epe means say. Say in me, literally, which is neat, isn't it? Say in me, O Muse, about, they would say wily, but polutropon, actually in polos is many, and tropon means much turning. So he was Odysseus, this is about Odysseus, was brilliantly able to adjust to whatever circumstances came up. So that polutropon, wily, isn't it? It makes him sound sneaky, but that's not the spirit of the word. Tell me, Muse, about the wily man who wandered long and far after he sacked the sacred citadel of Troy. He saw the cities and knew the minds of many men, but suffered at sea many sorrows in his heart, struggling for his life and his companion's return home. The English is so pathetic. So ye are numenos in sukim kai noston. Noston means the homecoming. It's a really big word. It's actually the central theme of the Iliad and just of the Odyssey. And to anticipate, Francis appears to interpret the Odyssey as, I hate the word allegory, but I can't think of a better one. It's kind of an allegory for the return, the soul's involutionary return to God. And the journeys that occupy books 9 through 12 of the Odyssey, he interprets as a sort of a narrative account of the trials of the plains. We'll look at a little bit of that. Aludos, but he didn't say this, comrades. Hiomenesper means longing for very much, much though he wanted to. For by their own recklessness they perished, childish fools, who devoured the cattle of the sun, Hyperion, who then deprived them of their homecoming day. Epe kainen, okay, tell us, goddess, daughter of Zeus, of sundry things. It means, of all these things, Theia means goddess, Thugater's daughter, Zeus, of Zeus, daughter of Zeus. Epe, say, even to us, tell us of these things. So both times there's an invocation for the higher power to be the source of the poetic utterance. And Francis is doing exactly the same thing. And the cattle of the sun, and what in their course of their journeys, they were warned. The cattle of Hyperion were sacred and not to eat them. But they got stuck on the island of Hyperion. Actually, Odysseus didn't want to stop there at all. He warned them, don't stop off here, but they were, in desperate straits, and all the others wanted to. And then the winds were from the wrong direction for a whole month. And then they slaughtered the cattle, and when they put them on the spits, the meat began to low, like moaning. And then Hyperion caused disaster so that all of them got killed. This is one of the trials and misfortunes that beset them on the way home. So in the some of the elements here which strike me, in these we see an invocation of the muse, an enunciation of the naming of the principal character or a description. He doesn't use, I think he used the word Odysseus, but Achilles there. And a declaration of the major theme, which for the Iliad is the wrath, the anger of Achilles. And for Odysseus was homecoming, the homecoming journey. And it also gives a starting point. For in the case of the Iliad, he says, which from the very time where Achilles and Agamemnon were divided, quarreling, and how the Iliad begins right after that is the Achaeans have been stuck outside Troy for 10 years and have been unable to overcome. Hector and other great heroes are defending Troy, and there's a quarrel in which Agamemnon takes Achilles' mistress, or his concubine, you might say, and Achilles is enraged about this and withdraws from battle and doesn't fight. And for the next there are 24 books in the Iliad, and for the next 18 books, the tides of war go back and forth until the Achaeans are really being really slaughtered. And at that point, Achilles' best friend Patroclus is killed, and Achilles, in rage, comes back into the battle and really overwhelms the Trojans, and it ends with a victory. It actually doesn't end with the overthrow of Troy. That happens later on. So the whole theme of it is the wrath of Achilles and the return of Achilles and Achilles into battle. So here, what we really get is a declaration, I think, of Baba as avatar. That seems to be the central defining theme, or subject, of Stay with God. And Stay with God, Baba gave him the order to write it in 1954. Baba had just declared his avatarhood the year before. So the entire book is a vast enunciation of who Stay with God, of what the avatar is and the imperative to hold on to him. So in the first book, The Occurrence of Reality and Illusion, Francis gives a narrative of the life story, which would be like the Ramayana, say, or the Gospels, an account of the life of the avatar. The next is the lover beloved, but Baba appears as the beloved, and Francis is the lover singing an impassioned love song to him. The very personal face of the avatar. The third is the impersonal God and the cosmology, the creator of the entire universe, and the story of the divine theme, the journey of the soul to God, from the most personal to the most impersonal. And these next two are not so much showing different sides of Baba per se, as what is entailed in us staying with him, because Baba gave him that topic, stay with God. So this one is about how to get to the feet of the perfect master. And this last one is the largest, is a long exploration of culture and how culture has failed to stay with God and what needs to be done to correct it in that respect. So it's about the avatar and what is entailed in holding on to this incarnation of the avatar, like that.
Yeah, it's allowing for differences. I mean, it's the same as Homer in showing the interplay between divine and human levels all the time, isn't it? And of course, Baba has made this symbol of the avatar the central saving symbol for us all, how the unimaginable infinite other actually does come down into human form in the great avatars, and of course is there potentially in human form in all of us, and that is which is the centre, which is really what Francis has done here in the poem.
Yes. Yes, and in these opening lines, he clearly sets the lineage for Baba and also for his own poetic enterprise. So here we have, he seems to treat Shiva like an avatar. And I don't quite understand, as though he was the first avatar. Does anybody know anything about that? I mean, I know stories about
Is it
Shiva.
the sustainer, like the creator, the sustainer, and the destroyer? That aspect, like
Shiva,
is the
you know,
destroyer. You
he'd be
Trinity.
the destroyer, and that in God Speaks
And that
anyway,
recreates,
is the third state of God, not the
Does he refer to him somewhere as the first avatar?
He does seem to refer to Shiva as the first
He brought
avatar.
down the waters of Ganga.
Yeah, and we'll come to that in a minute. He seems to act as though Shiva was the first avatar.
You remember what yesterday when you were editing the message article, after Baba mentions Zoroaster and Ram, he also mentioned Shiva. It was cut out, edited out by Ramjo.
Wow.
what did you just say?
Meher Baba.
What was that?
Yes, yesterday I was doing this thing with word. In the Meher message article, Baba
By
talked
Baba.
Yeah, by Baba. Zoroaster even took around masters as well as Avatar. The last sentence, I think he mentioned Shiva.
Mm.
But then when Ramjo did his Sri Meher Baba, his teaching of
Yeah.
philosophy, he edited it out. You remember?
No, I've forgotten
No
that.
questioning it.
I
That
like
was
it.
yesterday.
It's not a radical departure.
Yeah.
I'm sure I have read where there are minor groups of Shaivites who treat
Right.
him as an avatar. Yeah.
Well, there's a very strong, Shaivite is the adjectival form of Shiva. And there's a very strong Shaivite stream in Stay With God, right from the opening lines, for heaven's sakes. And so here we have the declaration of the different avatars. Ram, Krishna, he puts Abraham in there. Zarathustra, Buddha, Muhammad. God's avatar is now Baba. So that's the very central subject, or inseparable from the central subject. Now we have the invocation that comes in here. And notice that later on, he starts a lineage for those who have sung about the avatar. You had Vyasa, or Homer's not about the avatar. Vyasa is the reputed author of the Mahabharata and half of the other Sanskrit literature. He must have been a
Busy boy.
guy. Yeah, since the Mahabharata is about 100,000 lines long, which is 10 times as long as the Iliad, and that's only a little part of what he supposedly wrote. But that's a traditional name. Valmiki is the author of the Ramayana, traditionally assigned author, and he puts Homer in there in that category. I wonder if Baba ever said anything about Homer. Francis seems to treat Homer at least as a highly inspired poet, and there's one line where he seems to indicate he's God realized.
But didn't Baba hear this read to
Yeah,
him
Baba-
several times?
And Baba had a lot of input into it.
Yeah, if Baba had objected, he would have pointed out.
Right.
Obviously, he
But Baba doesn't appear to want to be too prescriptive about the list of avatars,
Yeah.
obviously.
Well, Abraham appears here, but as far as I know, not in other Baba literature. Baba doesn't specify Abraham as the avatar. And I'm talking to somebody one time, they told me that Eric said, yes, Baba said Abraham was the avatar, but sort of keep it quiet.
Yeah.
Mm.
I've heard
Eric
Eric
said that?
say things
Yeah.
where he clearly indicated that he was one of the avatars.
But keep it quiet, I did, why? I don't know.
Well, there is a...
You're not doing it very well.
Yeah, there is a quote.
Say
Remember at the beginning
Happy
of
secret.
Avatar Meher Baba. Avatar of the Age, Meher Baba, is a movie made by Erwin Luck.
Oh,
The
yeah.
beginning was mentioned Abraham as one of the avatars.
Well,
I
that's
think it was from Baba.
Erwin Luck is not a super authoritative source. Oh, it was from Baba. He was quoting Baba.
Yeah.
I remember Eric talking about that and the relation between Abraham and Zoroaster, and I forget exactly what he said, but it sounds... Actually, the list of avatars that we have clearly could not be complete even within that time frame. If Zoroaster, Baba did say once, I don't know how much we're to take this as being literally true, but that he was 8,000 years ago. And if that's the case, well, there must have been others there. So I think he just gave important ones, and there are others who are in that list.
Well, when you say Shiva is the first avatar,
Yeah.
the idea that there have been many Earths where the avatar comes over billions
Sure.
and billions of years, how could he name a first?
Mm.
And was Shiva an aspect of God or a human being who was on Earth, walked the Earth?
Yeah.
Was he both?
Well, he was called the ancient one in the Nothing and Everything. There's a story about Ganesh in which Baba talks about
Mhm.
Shiva.
Yeah. So in any case, Francis a number of times seems to refer to him as the first, the source of it somehow or another, without going into any kind of details of how that would be so.
I mean, the same way Adam was the ancient
Right, it's
one.
like Adam.
So it's kind of,
It's like another name
Yeah.
of Adam in a way, the first. Now the very first lines of Stay with God are devoted to Shiva and Kailash. And Mount Kailash, I have some pictures of it. There we go. It's a big peak, 23,000 feet, something like that. Very hard to reach, and there are these great lakes at its feet. Here's some more images.
Where is it? Himalaya?
It's up in, I think it's in Tibet, and it's north and a bit west, in the western part of India. And it's traditional, actually it has high associations in Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism. They all have their various stories about it. And it's supposed to be the place where Shiva perennially is. Let's see what I have about it. He resides at the top of it. He sits in perpetual meditation with Parvati, who's his wife, who is the feminine aspect, the consort. In Hinduism, Vishnu has Lakshmi as his consort, and Shiva has Parvati as his consort. And a story connected with this is there was a king. I don't know if it's related to the mountain as such. Okay, let me say more about the mountain. This becomes a really important symbol throughout Stay with God. This mountain as the sort of sacred vertical axis within the world, the earth plane, where God abides at the top. And the last book here in Stay with God is entitled, it has the little description that his table of contents is really important, actually. Yeah. The God-man as world axis, a living perfection of art. So world axis, now that would be the English translation of the Arabic word kutub. The perfect master is designated through the word kutub.
Then is that Latin term, axis mundi? Or?
Axis mundi, yeah. And also the book you loaned me, The Image of the Tree, would seem to me to be related to that, where the earth plane, the creation plane, is horizontality, and the axis is the upward movement that takes one to God. So in a way, the vertical axis is the ascent of involution, and the
So that's the one you climb up to different levels of horizontality.
yes,
So it's a transcendent.
maqams along the way until you reach the top. So this symbol functions throughout Stay with God, and Kailash is one of the central figures for it that he returns to time and again. And he identifies Shiva and Parvati. He links them with it. And that becomes an important theme throughout Stay with God, the masculine and the feminine, the sun and the moon. He goes through, that keeps coming up a lot. And in the fifth book, he gives a debased version of it with Ares and Aphrodite as the the degeneration. Actually, he's specifically criticizing Christianity, where Christ was degenerated into Ares, who's the god of war in Greek literature. And there's in Homer, and Homer tells the story of Ares and Aphrodite. They were having an affair. Aphrodite was actually the wife of Hephaestus, who's the divine craftsman. And Hephaestus found out about it. So he set a trap. And when they were making love, he caught them in a trap, and everyone came in and saw them and shamed them for it. So Francis keeps referring to Ares and Aphrodite, which I think is part of the same complex.
Yeah. And of course, Plato, who's another great influence on Francis, was very scornful about this sort of mythical treatment of the gods, which we saw as a real degeneration of the respect that should be paid to the unseen.
And that's one of the reasons why he would have kicked poetry, including Plato, would have kicked poetry, including Homer, out of his Republic, because it was an unworthy way of representing the gods, who are supposed to be better than this. So, right at the start, then, we have these, a great theme, both in Kailas and in Shiva and Parvati, who are stationed there. Shiva in perennial meditation, that dichotomy is placed in relationship to it. And it turns out that the Kailash temple in Allura, where I dare say many of you have been, is also brought into this complex by Francis. And I think the shape of the Kailash temple mirrors the contours of the mountain Kailash. There's a link there. And this is a depiction of true worship. Francis praises the Kailash. You've seen that, the sculptures there very highly. There's a stanza where he contrasts it unfavorably with Picasso's Guernica, in fact. So look at all the things that are connected right in this very first stanza. There's another theme that he brings up here too, where he says, Shiva, yes, for the first fathers nourished the seed of God, and Shiva, gentle Ganga. Now what this refers to is an account where Bhagirat is his name, was trying to redeem his uncles. Let me see who it was. Ancestors of his who had gotten themselves into trouble. 60,000 sons of King Sagar were trying to perform a certain yagna, horse sacrifice. But they, by mistake, blundered into the ashram of a rishi, Kapila. This happens all the time in Indian epic, where kings or people from the Kshatriya caste blunder into the ashram of a great rishi and disturb his meditation or otherwise displease him and get a curse on their heads.
That's the way you become a must, too.
A must?
By having an accidental contact with a God-realized soul, you can just instantly.
Turn
Remember,
you
that's
into
one
a
of the
must.
ways, yeah.
Uh-huh.
To stumble accidentally upon a perfect one, and you immediately
Become a
overcome and become. Yeah, remember, Baba, that was one of maybe 4 or 5 ways.
Oh, I don't remember that.
You're born into a family, that happens through an intense personal struggle, spiritually, Kundalini meditation.
Uh-huh.
And there were maybe a couple more, but that one I really like. You're accidentally wandering through the jungle, and there's the perfect master.
So Baba had to spend 15 years cleaning up the mess that all these rishis had made by turning all these people into musts. It's irresponsible rishis.
Yeah.
Well, they tend to be very fiery and quick to anger. Once they've given a curse, the rishi can't even take it back. They're stuck with it. So his I think Bhagirat's, his uncles were all under this curse. And he tried to redeem them. And the only method of doing that was to have the sacred Ganga, which was a river up in heaven only, brought down to earth. But Ganga had become very vain and proud and didn't want to do it. So the method that was accomplished and decided that when she came down to Earth, she would fall down and destroy the entire Earth. And to prevent that from happening, Shiva was prevailed upon, I think by Parvati, to have it fall in his locks and buffer the fall. And thus, Shiva gentle Ganga. That's what he's referring to, is that story. And here's an image of it. So this would be the compassion of Shiva.
One of the things that's amazing with Stay With God is like those 3 words, they mean nothing, but if you know all of that background, there's like so much depth there.
Yeah.
The whole thing is like that. There's just so many doorways that unless you've got the key, you can't enter, sort of thing.
Yeah, he'll make a very quick reference, like in this case, 3 words, but when you understand it, there's a tremendous wealth. He's not really talking about Shiva. You know, we have the idea of Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva. Shiva is the destroyer. But that's not a complete or adequate understanding of Shiva. To Shivites, Shiva is God. God himself. And that's really more how Francis is talking about it. Another name of God.
The creator too.
He actually has the creative aspect, the Shiva Lingam, the phallus. He's the yogi of renunciation, and he's also the creator of the universe. So he's a much more complex image than you'd get through the schematization, creator, preserver, destroyer. In fact, I don't think that understanding of Shiva really finds its way into Stay With God that I can see.
Isn't in the triumvirate? Isn't Shiva the active one, the only active one of the 3?
No, I think they all do their role. In Baba's account of Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh, and Stay With God, they all play their role. And that's the 3rd state of God in God Speaks. Brahma actually creates the universe.
Then he chills out after he created the universe.
Creates it, and then Vishnu preserves it. But Shiva is the destroyer. He's the agent of change in that way.
Yeah, and transformation.
Yeah, he's the agent of change.
Endings, or ending things that are obsolete, so to speak.
Right, nothing would move but for Shiva. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that is true.
Didn't Francis say that he mulled over those few lines for years, had them in his head and had them, and when the time came, this was going to be the opening lines?
And when a couple of years ago, when I was going through some of the archives here, some old notes of his, I did see something like that, very much like that. It was probably from a number of years before Stay With God, maybe 10 years or 5 years before that. Yeah. So he seems very deliberately to have, look at how he opens his poem, actually, with the Shiva Parvati, Kailash, the sacred mountain, which immediately anticipates a link with the Kailash temples in Aurora. All of that is right there.
Yeah.
This is an image of Ganga getting caught in the locks of, and I think this is Bhagarat praying for the intervention of Shiva. And thus, Shiva is an agent of mercy to mankind here, preventing the destruction of the earth.
Do you think also that Francis was very influenced by that in that guy Hamsa, who went up, climbed Mount Kailash, and he made reference to put the stake in the snow and spread his mat out on,
In fact, I was going to read that. I have all that.
Yes.
It's
so
fantastic.
Francis might have read that early on, and it's really resonated with him. And
yeah, that's right. We could even go on to that. Is there anything more to say about these opening lines first?
And of course, it
Here you
always
can see the geography of it. Mount Kailash, this huge, there's a big lake here, right there.
it's on the Tibetan border, isn't
The
it?
Tibetan border, yeah. And if there's a pilgrimage around it
Yes.
that is undertaken by a lot of people,
Yeah.
Hamsa did that, in
Yes.
fact. It takes a couple days.
Where's the Himalayas?
This is right in them, so it's
Yes,
here's
I thought so.
Nepal, Bhutan, so here's Mount Kailash right there. And you can see it poking its head. So here are these two lakes, Lake Manasarawar, and there's another lake right there with Mount Kailash there. And there's a little small lake very high up on the mountain where Hamsa had his great vision, isn't that right? It's like a pond, whereas this is a sizable lake.
In the
Do people
present
climb-
day, sorry.
Do people climb that peak expecting maybe a spiritual experience?
Not
Somebody
many
who knows-
climb the peak. They
I
walk
don't
around
think
it.
so. I don't think they climb it. I don't know whether there are prohibitions against climbing it or not. Hamsa himself did climb up to a cave on the side of it where he found an old.
They circumnavigate it, don't
Yeah.
they? Sort of go around it.
Yes.
In the present day, people
Yeah.
do
Mm.
it. I knew people who actually went twice.
Mm.
to-
Now, in those days, okay, so this lake is about 15,000 feet high, and this is, what is it, 6,714 meters is how high the mountain is. What's that, 24,000 feet, something like that.
Mm.
So it's a big peak. It's not as high as Everest, but it's the highest in that area. So,
It all has an esoteric meaning too, of course, in that Kailash stands for Mount Meru, which is the central pole
Navel
of
of
the
the
physical
universe.
universe,
yeah.
as pictured in a mandala. And
Yes.
but of course, it's also the spinal column in the human
Yeah.
being, where all the energy centers are, and which has to be ascended on the yogic path.
Do you happen to know in Kundalini, do they ever make the connection with Kailash as such?
I don't know about Kailash, but I've seen certainly that they make a connection between Mount Meru and Kailash.
Yes, yes, I know that's true. Yeah, Mount Meru is the center of the universe. Isn't it associated with the navel of the universe? It seems like I've read that. And this is another connection Francis does make with this vertical axis, where he's talking about cathedrals. In fact, do I have this other slideshow? I don't know whether I immediately find it or will I not. Does anyone remember where the stands are on? I think it's in that first thing here.
New York skyscraper.
Yes, the skyscrapers, yeah, here we are. 97. A lot of times he'll give sacred a divine idea in a sacred version and then in a debased version. So we have Shiva, Parvati, and then as the sacred divine couple, and then you have Ares and Aphrodite in the modern Western debased version of it. And so he does the same thing here
It's a good point.
with, where is it? Part 1, yeah, it'll be, yeah, here we go. Yeah, he goes from skyscrapers to a cathedral, and then he makes it clear that he's referring to the same vertical axis, one of the big themes in the whole poem. The skyscrapers of New York are the cathedrals of America. A cathedral is an aspiration, a glory, a peace, a silence reaching to the silence which is God. It is the vertical line from the horizontality of human limitation to the dimensionless point of human divine mind unlimitedness. I think this is a great explication of a central theme of the entire poem, right in the Proem. You know, with Kailash, this really would help to explicate what Kailash is.
Baba compares Kailash to the mind.
Human, the divine mind.
No, Meher Baba, he relates Kailash to mind.
Oh, does he?
Yeah, in the mystery.
Uh-huh, Okay, the Sushumna is unfolding from the Muladhara. Now he's talking about a cathedral here. The Sushumna unfolding from the Muladhara to the 1,000-petaled lotus in the crown of the head. Now this is the language of Kundalini. The Muladhara is the bottommost chakra at the base of the spine, right down here. And the Sushumna, there are 3 channels. There's the Ida and the Pingala on the 2 sides, and the Sushumna is the central channel. And I forget, I think the chakran flows up through the sushumna to the crown and down the other two sides. I've forgotten. But, the 1,000 petal lotus, that's the Sahasrara chakra, which is here. So he's explicitly interpreting the cathedral in the language of Kundalini, which seems to link the vertical axis with that also. A cathedral is a line between man and God, studded with the gems of adoration. You should go to New York. You should see culture stockpiled. You should see the herds of faces which don't smile, the crowds of eyes which don't laugh, the poor children of the rich being wheeled in Central Park. Any of you ever been to Central Park?
Yeah.
It does sort of look like that. Although nowadays, I don't know, maybe you wouldn't wheel kids because they'd be shot by a gang or something. Buttoned to the eyes from the weak sun. The skyscrapers of New York are beautiful in their reach to death, lovely with the red tears of undedicate labor. Now look at this. A cathedral is a line in the azure decked with devotees' tears. A shaft of Shiva, glorious in the rising sun. So here he brings Shiva in very explicitly. So it seems to me this is another in a cluster of associated images that he's taking from different spiritual traditions with the vertical axis. You can go out in there.
Is Shiva associated with the Kundalini yoga and things like that?
Oh, yeah.
He's very much the god of yogis, explicitly.
The Muktananda movement is Shaivite to its core.
But didn't Baba say the Kundalini can only get you to the fifth plane? Doesn't
Yeah.
he do this or that?
That's high enough.
That's right.
Yeah. At least you're safe after that. You know?
Yeah.
If you haven't, your mind hasn't been burnt out, messing with Kundalini,
Yeah.
undirected Kundalini.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
you can really get into grief.
Without a master, yeah. Boy.
Even Vivekananda wrote a book on it, and he warned about that too.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
very
Yogi
dangerous.
Bhajan that taught it like bolus, holus, to anybody, a lot of people lost it, were permanently damaged.
Yeah.
Through their Kundalini rising, perhaps prematurely, terrible, dangerous stuff. Some of the
Yeah.
people lost it.
Who was
was
Yogi?
Yogi Bhajan. He came from India in the early 70s.
Yeah, I think I
Started
might
something
have
called
read
the
his
3HO, the Happy, Healthy, Holy Organization.
book. Huh.
They started kettle potato chips. Now he was big in LA, and he ended up having ashrams all over the country. And
Yeah.
for about 8 months, I was one of his many gurus.
Oh.
Went around teaching Kundalini yoga.
Oh.
I didn't know anything. So yeah, the total novices trying to raise their Kundalini, they had serious burnouts. People I think never recovered. This is what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I had the idea that Nadine had something like that earlier before Baba.
Oh, really? She had a bad experience with it?
That she had damaged herself somehow. I may be wrong about this. I thought there was something though with her and her husband.
Nadine
Yeah.
Tolstoy.
Yeah.
I think she was doing Kriya yoga with
Okay.
Aurobindo. Who's
Oh. Oh,
according to
okay.
this, what's her name, Arundhati. Then when she met Baba, Baba said, "Stop it! You already
There's something in
damaged
Lord
your
Mayo
health."
a lot.
Okay, that's it then. Well,
Vivekananda,
Kriya Yoga is different from Kundalini, right? Okay.
Vivekananda had some serious nerve problem.
Really?
Yeah, I think killed him in the end.
And it was from Kundalini Yoga or something like that? Or? I remember I read his book on Raj Yoga, and a lot of it he's actually talking about Kundalini Yoga. And he right at the beginning, very specifically warned, saying you have to have a master to do this. Get into trouble.
I was around the Muktananda flavour, lived with it, so to speak, as
Yeah.
my third ex-wife was actually a member of the Muktananda Gurumai trip.
Yeah.
And they used to meet twice a week at our house. I didn't take part. I was watching TV, busy watching TV. what I noticed that it talked a lot about discipline to do with Kundalini, and not mess with, not to budge in this direction or that direction.
Yeah.
But there didn't seem to be much bhakti flavour about it. It was strict. It had to be like that. And you had to follow, what Muktananda said, and if not Muktananda, then his teacher. It was because the implication was that there was some danger.
Yes, I see.
And pay for another course.
Yeah.
Well, anything to do with the spirit is dangerous, let's face it.
Of course.
Very dangerous.
Gurdjieff quoted a Sufi master saying, those people who haven't mastered this yoga themselves, they teach people. These people should be shot. These teachers should be killed.
Really?
Now, when Francis begins his book 5, which is almost half of Stay with God, that's the one where it's sort of a vast review of culture and how to read true culture and make it stay with God. There are 4 parts to it. There are 40 stanzas each stanza 14 lines. And the first one, he begins by reviewing the different avatars and the truing of human civilization each brought, and how humanity used to have a direct connection and direct line humanity. He has a bunch of stanzas about that. But then on the 11th one, he gets to the Renaissance, which in his view marks the beginning of a rupture, where humanism put humanity on the throne and took God down. So he has a stanza, Renaissance. In fact, I'll look at, because this is getting right into the Hamza Kailash thing. I'm just noting when he brings it back. Oops. Where is it? Okay, I'm going to go to this other slideshow where I have it here. Yeah. Yeah, here we go.
So in this, I think Francis is following the perennialists, the Kumaraswamy a lot.
Yeah.
Very much. Who have that view also. So the Dark Ages were the ages of light. The perennialists felt that, the medieval. Actually, I think that's true. People talk, I think the Dark Ages is a very ignorant term for it. When you talk about like the 12th century, it was the most spiritual age the West ever had.
Fantastic stuff.
I mean, there's a lot of crap happening then too. We're in the Kali Yuga in any modern times, but they had their high civilization was very high indeed at that time.
What page is that in the book?
This is going to be page 94. The Dark Ages were the ages of light. Then men denied the saint in them. And the saint in them died. And the line of saints came to an end. And there were no channels by which the flow of truth could be reflected in men's lives. Renaissance, promise of freedom from two-dimensional form. This is, where perspective was invented, which was supposed to be great progress, which Francis is very contemptuous of that idea. And as I think many people nowadays would be. Vision of smokestacks behind the eyes. Ears twitching in anticipation of symphony of machines. Spirit took wings to the terra firma of colonialization, to solid commodities sweated out of the labor energy of other people. Armies of bees, standing in line, sweating out wax of cement and steel. Colonization, last reach of, establishment of territories in space from which to dominate the whole earth. So he's enunciating themes that he's going to wind up developing for this entire section. He has another stanza on that. But now, the reason I'm doing this is that now after enunciating the whole story to the modern age and it's falling away from God, he retrues to the vertical axis with this stanza from Hamza. And Hamza wrote this book, The Holy Mountain, which you have in the library here. It's a treasure.
Mm.
And I had always seen it in the notes to Stay with God, and I figured, oh, it's probably, you know, a nice book on Kailash about facts and figures of how big it is, and you know, different saints associated. I thought it was that kind of book. No, it's not at all. It's a bunch of you have read it, right? Or some of you have read it.
Mm.
It's a guy from Maharashtra, a Marathi speaker, who had been he was a spiritual quest. He wanted to have the darshan of Lord Dattatreya, who's Brahma Vishnu Mahesh, actually. Narayan
What
Maharaj.
century?
This is 19th to 20th, modern.
Mm.
I think he did this pilgrimage maybe 1904, 1905 or so, right then. Narayan Maharaj was a devotee of Dattatreya, and he would have been alive when this guy was doing it.
So Dattatreya as in Krishna, as in Vitoba and Vital and
It's the three-headed god Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh.
different.
It's that one, yeah. But I found it to be extraordinarily moving book. He's a real lover of God, boy. Either that or he was the greatest faker I've got, but why would he have written something like that otherwise? And his journey to get there, was an ordeal, man. He practically killed a whole bunch of times. It wasn't easy at all. And after doing the circumambulation of the mountain, the whole thing, he wanted to go up to the lake, the pond up high in the mountain, and he wouldn't leave until he actually had Dattatreya's darshan. And Francis gives a little summary of that, and I'd like to actually, after this, read his 2 or 3 pages from his account, because it's really beautiful. Didn't you think so?
Wonderful, yes.
Extraordinarily moving. He sure seems like a lover of God. Francis treats him like a high order saint, if not a perfect master.
Yes.
If he was a fake, Baba would have corrected Francis here.
Yeah, he must have been for real.
Did Baba
When you
ever
read him,
speak-
it's impossible not to believe it.
Did Barbara ever mention this guy? Or?
Not that I know of. It's only here that I've ever heard of. But again, he features him, not just here, but when you see Hamza in Sivka, that's this guy. So the sun was setting over Sri Kailas. So that's Mount Kailash. Here we have Mount Kailash again, coming back into the story. I bowed to the 4 directions, spread my tiger skin on the ice, planted my staff on the right, and cried, "Victory to the Lord, my master." Then sat in Siddhasana facing north, fixing his glorious image between my eyes. Cruel winds, bitter cold, snow up to my chest, but unbounded love defeated these enemies. On the 3rd day, the Lord Dattatreya, in his physical form, came to me, picked me up and caressed me. Manas merged into Antakarana, Antakarana into Chitta, Chitta into Buddhi, and into Ahamkara, all into the Satchidananda of the Supreme Self. Now that sure sounds like God realization. These are the different. This is in Vedanta and in Samkhya and Indian psychology. These are the different constituents of the false self. Manas is the lower mental body. Chitta is like sanskara, is the stuff of the mind. Anyway, I won't try to explain it all. It would be a whole topic in itself. But here's where the whole thing is. Let me see. Described by Hamza himself. Francis does a very nice summary of these several pages. So this is, why don't we have anyone else want to read this out if you can see it? Is it too small?
Here on this lake, Gorakund.
And by the way, sorry to interrupt, Gorakund, to get to that lake, he practically died. You had to go quite high, not the track around the mountain, but quite a journey up to this little pond that's at 19,000 feet or something. And the first time he tried it, he got lost and by a miracle found his way back to the camp. And then he tried it a second day. So he almost froze to death. Sorry.
From Bhagwan Srihamsa, the holy mountain. Here on this lake, Gurukund, my object, which I had cherished all these long years, was fulfilled by the loving grace of Sri Sadguru, my master. My joy knew no bounds. The darshan of Sri Kalai, Lake Manas, and Gurukund carried away all the strain and stress of the arduous journey. My heart was elated. I felt my life's ideal was fulfilled. My idea was to have a sight of the physical form of the Lord Dattatreya himself, and to get myself initiated into the realization of self. I was determined either to realize this or die in meditation while sitting in yogic posture. I began by looking in all four directions, and then spread my tiger skin on the icy floor of the lake, planting my staff on the right.
So Francis directly echoes
Yeah.
that.
I again looked at the sky and at Mount Kalai, crying, "Victory, victory to the Lord, my master." I stood for a few minutes facing the north. After this, I sat on the tiger skin in the Siddhasana posture, with my face towards the north. It was sunset. I closed my eyes and passed into meditation, all along trying to fix the mind steadily on a mental image
Sorry.
of the Lord Dattatreya in the center between my eyebrows.
Okay.
The first night I experienced terrible hardships, bitter cold, piercing wind, incessant snow, inordinate hunger, and deadly solitude combined to harass the mind. The body became numb and unable to bear the pangs. Snow covered me up to my breast. Until after midnight, I was fighting desperately with my mind. My body helped my mind, and I thought both of them were bent on defeating my object. But self-confidence, determination, and my unbounded love towards my master conquered them in the end. I succeeded in subjugating the invulnerable enemies and was steadily riveted to my meditation and, as a consequence, lost consciousness of the body and of the world outside. It's so difficult to say anything further when I had passed beyond these things. Every moment increased the intensity of my yearning to see my master, and it was while I was in this state that I thought I heard a voice. I did not leave my meditation. Later on, I found that the image which formed the subject of my meditation grew more and more dim. Yet I refused to allow my mind to leave its point of concentration. Instead, I fixed it there with added determination. "Oh, my child, oh, my dear." I heard these words thrice, but did not open my eyes, for the mental image of my master was still there between the eyebrows. I wanted to see the Lord Dattatreya in physical form, and naturally it was impossible for me to be satisfied with his voice alone. Moreover, no sight of a physical form was possible until the mental one had disappeared. As I was so keen about the physical sight, I did not leave my meditation, though I heard the call 3 times. At last, all of a sudden, the mental form disappeared. Automatically, my eyes were open, and I saw, standing before me, the Lord Dattatreya, my master, in his physical form. At once, I prostrated myself on the icy ground like a staff and placed my head at his lotus feet. 3 days had passed like 3 moments for me. My master lifted me up like the Divine Mother and hugged me to his breast and caressed me all over the body. Thereafter, he gave me the mantra, sacred words, and initiated me into the realization of the self. What a great bliss it was. I cannot describe that joy. It is beyond any description through words.
And it goes on, and this is worth reading.
The master preaches through his silence. and all the doubts of the disciple are solved.
I wish we had the Sanskrit for this.
Thus says a Sanskrit poem. You can take as much enlightenment from these lines as you find in them. Here, my manan,
It should be manas.
manas, my mind, merged into antakarana, the heart. The antakarana with the manas merged into the chitta, mind stuff. The chitta, along with the antakaran and manas, merged into the buddhi, the intellect. The buddhi with chitta, antakarana, and manas merged into the ankar, egotism. And the ankar, along with the buddhi, chitta, antakarana, and manas, all merged into the absolute Brahman. I found myself reflected everywhere in the whole universe. It was all one harmony, full of wisdom, infinite love perennial, and bliss eternal. Where was the body, its tenements, and the life? It was all Satchidananda, truth, wisdom, and bliss.
Isn't that a knockout?
I'll say.
Ooh.
Where is the body, its tenements, and the like? I like that one.
What's that?
Where was the body, its tenements, and the like? I like that one.
And the eye.
It's tenements in the
The tenements in the eye.
Yeah.
Tenements in the...
Did Bhagwan Sri Hamsa, he was a disciple of a well-known guru?
I've never been able to find that out. And he returned to Maharashtra, and I don't really know what happened to him later. This book became well known. I mean, the introduction is by William Butler Yeats, and it's 20, 30 pages long.
Wow.
So there obviously is a history, we're just not familiar with it.
Yeah. So here's another Kailash connection that Francis is making here, where you see the summit of human experience. It sounds like the realization of God, either that or it was a very high order experience. Now,
There's plenty of stuff on Wikipedia about Hamsa.
Oh, good.
any little choice details?
His original name is Sri Natikar Swami.
Yeah.
He was born in 1878.
Does it say anything about his guru?
Give me a minute.
I didn't see anything when I was looking up about a guru. I mean, he always treats Dattatreya
Yeah, that was
as
his
his
guru.
guru. Yeah. So
Surely he had a guide though, of some kind.
he never mentions it in the guide in his book. But we have a combination here of a yogic path and an extreme devotional path too. And that's throughout the entire book. That's the thing, there's this very touching love in all of this, where Dattatreya picks him up in his arms. Actually, Dattatreya then carried him back down to his base camp, and it took about 15 minutes to go back, even though it had taken him days to get up there.
It was downhill.
Yeah, downhill, that's it. And also he could probably fly, you know, it's cheating. Now, to go back to Homer, just some other uses of Homer. This is back to book 1, and in the middle of it, Francis gives a lot of emphasis to Baba's work with the musts. He seems to, of course, he was given the order by Baba in 1955, and that's as far as he goes in his biography of Baba. But Baba's visits to the West, Francis covers in one stanza. Ha! He really definitely put the West in its place. Because all the books had been about the West, you know, and I think he was sick of it. But when he gets to the musts, he really gives them quite a major, major treatment. And he begins it with the Odyssey, clearly treating the Odyssey as a representation in narrative form of the journey through the plains. So here's where he starts this. Up to now, Baba, apart from the training of your close disciples, your work had been with the children of the world. Till now, notice this invocation to the muse thing. Homer does this too. Baba, you tell, because author of worlds and singing, of your work for the next 10 years with the children of God, who have given up the toys of guns and rackets, and have turned their backs on the world jungle and its beasts, and have come out into the open spaces of spirit, wide plains and the mountain passes of consciousness, where their only playfellow is God. And now this is all from the Odyssey. Or have left the harbor of men, that would be Troy, and have brought the war to a successful conclusion, and set sail for home. So nostos is the Greek word for homecoming. Home would be Ithaca for Odysseus. Over the trackless seas. Some are detained in that land whose fruits contain forgetfulness. I don't know if any of you, do you know the Odyssey, any of you? But this is the island of the lotus eaters. And the lotus eaters, went, some of Odysseus' men went ashore, and they didn't attack them. A lot of the islands, Odysseus began with a whole group of ships, and they got massacred more and more as they traveled along. But they didn't attack them, but they just brought them to their home and gave them some of these lotuses. And as soon as they ate them, Odysseus' men lost all interest in homecoming, but just wanted to sit and eat the lotus. So, I mean, this sounds like the intoxications of the plains, doesn't it? Some of these enchantments of the plains. I mean, it could be drugs, but I don't think he means that. He was talking about inner states. Some sit in the giant's cave, plotting his blinding and their escape. Now, this is a reference to a long episode. It's books 9 through 12 in the Odyssey, where the story, all of these stories are told. There, Odysseus comes ashore and goes into a big, huge cave, which is empty. And lo and behold, a cyclops comes in, one-eyed, big giant, and puts a huge boulder by the door so they're trapped, and starts eating them 2 at a time. And so for several days they're caught in here. And then Odysseus comes up with this brilliant contrivance where he stabs the cyclops with a red-hot stake in his one eye so he's blinded, and he contrives to get out of it. Odysseus is really, really clever. But then in the course of leaving, Odysseus can't control himself. He's actually, when Odysseus, probably Francis would attribute significance to this too. When the Cyclops, at one point, Odysseus gave the Cyclops this divine wine he'd been given by someone. And the Cyclops liked it and said, what's your name? I'd like to do you a favor. And Odysseus says, oh, my name is Uden, and that means nobody. Nobody. And so the Cyclops says, okay, this is my favor to you. I'll eat you last after I've eaten all the others. And then he gets completely drunk on this wine, and then Odysseus has sharpened this big stake, this huge log, and they drive it into the Cyclops' eyes. And the Cyclops starts bellowing. The Cyclopses are all antisocial. Each one lives in his own cave far apart. But when he's bellowing, all the other Cyclopses come. And they say, who has done this to you? And he says, nobody has done it to me. And they say, well, if nobody has done it to you, it's your problem, and they all go. So it's rather clever. But then, get this, Odysseus then escapes, they go down to the shore, they take off in their boat. And then Odysseus can't refrain from boasting. And he shouts across the ocean, well, you thought you were going to kill us all, but you didn't, did you? And the Cyclops gets pissed and hurls a big rock, and it lands just close to the boat, and he goes further out. And Odysseus then says, if you want to know who did this to you, it was Odysseus, son of Laertes. And it turns out that the Cyclops is the son of Poseidon, the god of the ocean. And he prays to Poseidon, putting a curse on Odysseus. So it's like that egoism of Odysseus got him into this trouble.
And being nobody got him out.
Yeah, and being nobody got him out, but when he declares himself so-and-so the son of somebody, then he says, kill them, or if you don't kill him, let him get home after great difficulty with all of his companions killed. That's what the Cyclops prays for, and that happens. Again, this very much lends itself to a spiritual understanding.
Odysseus himself was a descendant of Zeus, wasn't he?
I can't remember.
Through Laertes, I think.
Oh, And by the way, Francis, yes, she does mention it. Okay. Some are being feasted by Aeolus, master of the winds and music. Aeolus controls all the winds of the world. So when he leaves, he puts all the winds into a leather bag and gives it to Odysseus and says, the winds are controlled, you can go home now. And they've gotten to within sight of Ithaca. They can see Ithaca. And Odysseus then falls asleep, unfortunately. And all of his men say, you know, they don't know what Aeolus gave him. They said, he must have given him all sorts of treasures and gold and stuff like that. You know, and we're not getting anything. Let's open it and see what's in it. So they open it, and all the winds escape. And hurricanes blow them far away. So that's the disaster. You know, they were on the verge of getting home. And then they wind up back at Aeolus's island, and Odysseus comes pleading, and Aeolus says, you fools, you must be cursed. I'm not going to have anything more to do with you. And then they're
Spiritual greed.
Some are engaged in mastering the Tantra of Circe, and we'll look at that in a second. And some have arrived at the island of Alcinous, provider of winged ships. When Odysseus is finally washed up on the island of Alcinous, he's, even though he's naked, everyone else is dead, Alcinous welcomes him. Actually, his daughter would love to marry Odysseus, but Odysseus only wants Penelope, by the way, his very faithful wife, is at Ithaca. She really reminds me of Mara. She really did. The way Penelope's described. But Alcinous has him tell this whole story out before his court. Then Alcinous has ships that can take you anywhere in the world in a single night. And so he gets into the ship, he falls asleep, and when he wakes up, he's in Ithaca, he's home. They put him ashore, the ship is gone. And again, that lends itself to an understanding of perfect master, Phana Baka, or Phanaphila.
So you said when Odysseus was lying naked, does it symbolize something like stripped of all the ego or sanskara?
It invites that interpretation, doesn't it? Yeah. He's lost everything, almost drowned, completely naked, washed up on a foreign shore, and taken in there. And then Francis then gives, it seems like, a spiritual interpretation. If we had time, I'd read the whole section. This is a very famous passage from the Odyssey. But Eurylochus, he had sent Eurylochus with a bunch of his other men into this island to see who's there. And what happened was Circe saw them, goddess, and she welcomed them in. There are all these animals outside her house, you know, pigs and lions and everything. And they were frisking around in a very friendly manner. But she just takes them in to her house and gives them some food. And as soon as they eat it, she takes out her wand and turns them into pigs. And all those other animals turn out to have been previous visitors who had this happen to them. And Eurylochus, when he saw Circe, was very skeptical and didn't accompany the other men and didn't know what happened to them, but they never came back. So he goes back to Odysseus and said, Odysseus, let's get out of here. But Odysseus won't leave his companions. So he starts out alone, and Hermes, God, comes and warns him and tells him what to do. And as in consequence, he masters Circe, and she says, I was warned you would come, and they go to bed together. And actually, Hermes had told Odysseus to do all of that, to go to bed with her too. And Francis interprets this as mastery of Tantra. So Eurylochus he left by the hollow ship feasting, but himself went, for a strong constraint was on him for the trial of the most sacred tantra. You see, he's interpreting it that way, which made beasts of his men, but from which he emerged gloriously, because God sent him a messenger of right guidance, that's Hermes. And he listened to him and did that which he was told. But that messenger of winged feet and golden wand came not to the others, for it was not their time, and they wouldn't have listened to the words of his sure counsel. And Homer doesn't say that, but Francis is bringing that understanding. And he went to the house of the goddess and called her name, and she heard him and opened the shining door and took him in and gave him a drink, into which he put a strong test. But Odysseus, godlike with perfumed presence, and remembering his words, so he interprets Hermes as a messenger of Zeus, her god himself, drew his sword to slay her, but she embraced his knees and praised him. Thou hast a pure mind within thee that may not be enchanted. Thou must be Odysseus, of whom I was warned would come for the right's fulfillment. Let us go into my bed, that in love and peace we may trust each other. Odysseus answered her, how can you ask me to be gentle with you, when you have turned into swine those that follow and trust me? When you have, surely there is still guile in your heart, and you would unman and destroy me when you had me naked before you. Swear to me that you plan not my hurt. And she swore to him by God that she would not harm him. And he went up into the beautiful bed of Circe. And from that time on, she's a friend and helper for all of them and all of this. So he interprets this apparently as a mastery of a tantra, or those inner, I don't know anything about tantra except a little bit of
It sort of speaks a little bit of like what we were saying before about the spiritual path being dangerous, like he's sort of wanting assurances that that he's not going to get hurt on the way up.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
And she does promise, and she actually got instructions from Zeus on this when Odysseus comes to help him out. Now, since we're almost out of time, I'm just going to mention some of the other uses of Homer that come up. And this is in the love song of John Carey. We were just looking at the Odyssey, but the Iliad, actually the Greeks considered the Iliad to be the greater of the two epics. And Francis refers to, and the Iliad is all about warfare, heroic struggle on the back plains of Troy. Long, long books of fighting between various heroes. Like a hero will get a god or goddess will be behind a particular hero and will be unbeatable. They call it the Aristeia, the best for a certain book or two books. And then his fury is spent, and then the tide of war turns. But, okay, sunbeat and rainbeat, veil upon veil, day veil of brightness, night veil of dark, face veils and form veils, gossamer spun, crowded close and thickly, sail veils. You notice how sails come up. And the Odyssey, whenever he talks about sails in the ocean, the Odyssey usually hovers in the background of reference. Sail veils and flag veil hoisted over a veil of sea, veil voyage and returning, rain veil of weeping, and a place he hoped where none knew of ships and journeying, and the far shadowing spear of his glance. Baba thou beloved. Now spear is really a reference to the Iliad, where the spear is the weapon used. Nursing his wound, never healing, but widening, because the spear had remained in it. So you see, Baba becomes the spearman who's stabbing him, in fact. This is like an Achilles image. And but he's interpreting this spiritually. Widening and love festering. Soughing, how do you say that? Sowing off veil flesh. Widening cleanly, and the spearhead of bliss entering more deeply into the flesh veils, ever more hungrily and healingly, as the sun into the earth where the farmer sets his plow, more deeply into the sour subsoil where no sun has been before, etc., etc. So he's been explaining what veils mean, and the spearman is the one who stabs you, and your veils are gradually dissolved and torn away. So this is very much an Iliadic image. If you read, I mean, I spent years reading Iliad, and there are page after page of spears going into people.
It's also a little bit reminiscent of Jesus on the cross. That guy which pushes
Stabbing
the
him
spear
there.
into it at the end.
And right here he makes this explicit. This is later in the love song of John Kerry. Ho, the nothing, etc. Ho, what a box of tricks you are, Krishna Baba. Ho, but you are the compassionate one himself, Buddha Baba, the most shepherd of the flocks of the world, Jesus Baba, the long shadowing spear and singing one, O Rama Achilles Baba. So because Ram shot arrows, so he's interpreting arrows that way, as the arrow of light that kills you, kills the false self ultimately by tearing all the veils and dissolving them away. So that's kind of a spiritual reinterpretation of all the warfare that happens. There's one place, and I forget where it is, where he said, you'd think any fool would know that the heroes of the Old Testament and the Iliad were souls on the spiritual path, going through their trials and struggles. So the last thing I'll just mention is where he uses that imagery, and this is in Book 3, God Speaking. Very beautiful, poetic narration of the divine theme, this narrative. But here he's, his loves, this is about halfway through the first pass through the divine theme here. His loves loved, enjoyed, and suffered, stored and remembered, sifted and sorted and evaluated through many lives. Now this is the beginning of involution. Till he takes his stand in the flood mightily, and suffers the flood, and turns the weight of its waters, to break through the passes of the encircling mountains, onto the plains of Troyland. You see, this is Troy, the Battle of Troy, and you know what Kurukshetra is? It's the great battle in the Mahabharata. The Bhagavad Gita happens in the Battle of Kurukshetra. That dialogue happens there. So this sounds like encircling mountains is the entrance into the spiritual path, doesn't it? Sounds like it to me. And when then you're in struggle. One time there was somebody who was becoming a resident in India, Abode, and he was talking to Erich about something or other, complaining about something, and Erich said, "Brother, welcome to the slaughterhouse." So the spiritual path is not nice.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Turns it against the massed shields and spears. This is very much the Iliad. And nodding forest of plumes. Again, they have these plumes as with their armor. And the sudden rifles that hurl destruction and carry death, charging himself with impetuous valor and unheard of feats of courage and endurance. No longer can he be counted a man, but is a hero unthinkably great and unimaginable in feats with weapons of pent waters in his hands, and the roar of waters in his soul. It sounds like the Oddyssey. But also great is the enemy. If he falls, he dies a hero's death. And the battle maidens bear him to a hero's reward. There's a passage in the Iliad. It's I know in this day and age, it's hard for modern people to respond to this, but there's one of the women in Troy is saying how, when there's a field where all these young men have been killed, and she said, And it's very beautiful. And we don't usually think of it that way, but you have the feeling in the Iliad that is a feeling like this. This is the inner spiritual struggle, and actually to give up your life in that inner spiritual struggle is a noble and beautiful act, and the sight is a beautiful one. So now when Homer says that, I really got, oh, I suddenly could see it. He was talking about. But if he sustains the war and bears on gloriously, God and his guru guard him and pour into his soul divine grace and into his limbs unmatchable strength until he wins to the first circle of the 7-circled citadel of God. It sounds like the first plane, etc. So here he's using the Iliadic imagery of battle and warfare, and the Mahabharata has the same thing, to talk about the spiritual struggle.
Yeah.
So these are some of the uses of Homer that come up, and there's a clear spiritual interpretation of it that Francis brings to it. That's kind of what I had to say.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Okay.
Remember in